This is a question for those who might have just come off of a course of formal education. Maybe they've finished a degree or a certificate at a university. Maybe they've enrolled in some class or other in some language, had the opportunity to study abroad, participate in some structured language learning program, and are just coming out of that and realizing that now the responsibility to maintain and continue their language learning is on them. How does one maintain the momentum in those cases? How does one continue to feel motivated when it can feel like you're spinning your wheels? It's hard to set your own schedule. Should you be content with a slightly lower level of productivity? How should we think about these moments of unstructured time when we've just finished some more formal program?
Okay, that's a great question. I wish that formal education was more overtly specific about that, this is a limited time period that you're going to be in a structured program. And if you want to continue learning your whole life long, then you need to sort of plan for that and sort of build those study habits in as you're going along. But you probably have done that kind of thing unconsciously, at least if you're in a position to ask this kind of question. But I can just recall from my own youth that was a hard thing to do. So I guess that would be the first piece of advice to anybody who can conceive of doing that kind of thing and wants to do that and might think of asking somebody like me for my advice. Think, oh, he might know because he's done it. Just please know that I had to work on that for a long time to develop that. So the project of drawing up a schedule that you can keep and being your own self-motivator is quite a difficult one. But if it's something that you really desire in your heart of hearts and you just keep working away at it and refusing to let yourself be discouraged by sort of setbacks if you plan a schedule and set it up and then it doesn't work because you haven't got that. So I would say that, just sort of keeping that sort of framework in mind is an important thing to do. And with that said, you mentioned sort of slightly lower level of productivity. So let's say you have been in a formal program and just, I don't know, a full scale, degree, bachelor or master's degree or something, or certificate. If you're coming out of a full sort of semester or quarter's worth of study where you're thinking of doing that, sort of pretty much all day, every day, it's probably not going to be that at the next stage of your life. But so that will help you to think, okay, if I can just sort of take the equivalent of, say, one class or, the amount of work that I might give to pursuing, a full course of study in, say, a language. So if you've been studying, say, German or Korean or whatever language for a number of years in a formal program of study, ideally you would have a base by the time you get out that you're looking to continue building upon. And I think it would be important, if this is the kind of thing you're thinking about, to kind of get going on that right away, not let the sort of base go away. So that when you're strong enough to really build upon it, that's the time to sort of seize upon the moment rather than to sort of let it go and then sort of try to pick it up when you've let it rust a little bit. So you can sort of strike while the iron is hot and say, I'm just going to take from my course of study where I had, say, 3 or 5 classes. I'll just take one at first and see if I can get into the habit of really doing that on my own. And just all the things that one does when trying to establish a habit, sort of plotting out the hours in your day and trying to set up a regular systematic program that you can keep for regularity. I mean, if you want my advice, regularity really is the key. So sort of setting a relatively low bar and building upon it is better than sort of setting a too high a bar and not making it. So those are some of the first thoughts that I have in thinking about that question.
To build on what you said about that low bar, there's differing advice about productivity and setting habits out there. Some people tend to a very minimalist, you might call it an atomic habits approach. In this case, say, they'll tell themselves, I'm going to study 10 minutes of German a day. And the idea being that if I start by studying 10 minutes, I'll eventually start wanting to add to that. Other people actually find the minimalist approach somewhat demotivating, where it's like, if this is all I'm going to do, I'll just either get it out of the way or push it off and not actually get around to it. They think if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person to do. They want to fill up their schedule, set themselves a couple of worthwhile goals. How do we strike the balance between something that's feasible and yet something that represents a motivating enough challenge?
Okay. Well, yeah, I like James Clear's book very much, and I think I made a video talking about it a couple of years ago, and I think that is an excellent approach for starting a brand new habit. If you, this channel is for people who are probably already passionate about languages or wanting to learn it, but I totally recognize that there are many people out there in the world who have studied other things and do other things, and the whole concept of wow, teaching myself a language, it has not interacted with their sort of event horizon or perspective of anything they can do in life before. It's just a totally new kind of activity. So for a person like that, starting very small with an atomic habit and just sort of making sure that you can build that in, and get established, I think is a good approach. I think the kind of person that might feel the second way that you said, that it's sort of not enough of a time chunk, I would challenge that kind of person. Have you got that kind of habit set up? I mean, if you do that and then it's not enough, then why can't you build more upon it? If you're just thinking that might not be enough, maybe think about getting that habit established. But if you have that habit established, if you have the ability, that you can sit down and plug away at something for an hour at a time, then I think that, try that and see if you can do that on your own. If that works, that might be. But then if you say that's overwhelming, I'm not getting anything done, I think that's where you sort of have the trick, the setup. So I would sort of err on the side of the atomic habit side and challenge the people who think the other way if they've really got that established.
Another question that comes to mind is one advantage of the formal program of study, one advantage of studying in a class setting is that there's fairly clear benchmarks of progress. I've finished this unit in the textbook. I've learned these vocabulary words and scored this much on this quiz. When you're on your own, it can be difficult to both figure out what that kind of feedback looks like and to have the motivation that comes from striving for those benchmarks. How does one navigate that situation?
Yeah, and furthermore, before I answer that, I think that it's also difficult to gauge your progress, to know if you're making progress without those problems. It's not just that you can't feel it or have the motivation, but you really might not know if you're making progress. So you might just be studying on your own and think that you've got a good schedule, but you might be using an ineffective method and not really making the progress that you could be making. So again, this is an inherent part of the whole program of autodidactic learning, and that's what I call lifelong learning. It's just something that, again, I wish somehow, in a way, the expectations that are set up that you can have this external guidelines are that if we think about the relative time period of being in school when you're in your youth compared to the amount of years that you might have with an active intellectual life after you may have left a formal learning situation. I think if you were in place to think, well, I'm not always going to have those benchmarks, I need to make them myself. It doesn't seem terribly hard to me. Again, if we're sticking with languages and language learning, you can kind of do the same thing. If you have a series of textbooks, teaching textbooks, I mean, they also have a progressive series. You work your way through them. When you get to a more advanced level, if you're interested in reading, hopefully you will be. You have books that you aspire to read, things that you aim to read. If you have access to a sort of a language laboratory, like the one that I have in my basement here, where books are arranged by theme and by language, and you have somebody who you can have access to sort of a media tech and go through there, you'll see the different types of manuals and materials that you can use. So I think there are various ways of working your way through materials and sort of just setting goals of books that you want to read that might bring you in that way. But again, this is it's a good question because it's something that's part of the maturation process of when I take control of my own learning, I have to have some way of doing that, and I can't expect the old benchmarks to still be in place.
Mm-hmm. Maybe to draw an analogy with, for instance, exercise programming, where someone who's a complete beginner to any program of exercise could pretty much do anything, and so long as they do it semi-regularly, they'll experience benefits from that. Someone who's been training for a while is going to experience something different, where they both have to be more systematic with their training, but they're also going to experience slower rates of progress. people coming off of a formal course of instruction, whether that's languages or anything, have already had some training, so they're not complete beginners. And so to add to the problem of gauging your progress that you just added is the fact that at their level, progress is not going to be as fast nor as linear. How does one strike the balance then between just becoming content with that and saying, I'm just going to try to maintain what I have already, versus the desire many people would have to say, I really want to improve? How does one strike that balance?
Okay. Well, again, let's just keep it in the realm of languages and language learning and stuff. And so if we're talking about coming out of a formal program with, a good solid foundation in a language, some solid functionality, but, still years to go of growth until one would say, I truly have, I'm comfortable with this language as an operating system. I've mastered it in however degree I want to say that. So yeah, you're very right. That is, the learning curve is very steep at first. I mean, you make great progress at first, but by the time you're at that level, you're going to be kind of the basic intermediate slump anyway. So you'll get out. So just what I've observed is that that is an important time, those first couple of years, to keep that language alive, to keep it fresh. So it might not be so important to make progress as it is important to keep using it, to keep it alive. I've seen many people who do very well in language programs and then graduate and don't use them just for a couple of years. And something about the way that they learn them in that formal learning, you can make a lot of progress there, but also that can sort of evaporate quickly as well. So I think that would be the crucial thing. Just find some way of making sure that you're getting some exposure and some use of it, and then worry about improving and know that if you get that regular use, you might not feel it, but over the years it will accumulate your experience.
Perhaps as a final question, people watching your channel, channels of other polyglots, people who have been teaching themselves all their lives, are evidently people who want to do some of that, want to develop those habits as well. But for someone who's struggling to develop a self-teaching habit, at what point is that difficulty just inertia that needs to get pushed against? And at what point is the, so to speak, the itch of, I wish I had a more formal program, just a sign that maybe it'll be more beneficial to seek out a formal program and just go back to some form of more structured or community education? How does one navigate those decisions, and where can one go if one does want to return to a more structured or communal format?
Well, at the risk of making this too much of a commercial, that's one thing that's sort of happening in my academy, is that I have a lot of people who have sort of, had a decent education and sort of, are kind of in their mid-30s, early 30s, and sort of wishing they had a bit more, and they, and what we were just talking about, maybe that they had a foundation in a language but haven't had a way to use it. Well, they can come and use it, once a week with me, reading literature and discussing this here. And then I talk to them and I've encouraged them, and I've encouraged a number of people, a handful of people now from the academy have gone back to graduate school. I mean, it was something that they were thinking about, and I encouraged them to do that. And I think that with the sort of proviso they already have in their head, that I am aiming at learning on my own and continuing to teach myself for the rest of my life. But the more solid formal education I can have as a jumping block, the better. And so going back under those circumstances is a good way. So not everybody, goes back to graduate school. So some people are happy just, meeting and talking, once a week in various literature circles that I have, and then they come and then they go and they've made progress, and then they may go and not, off into the world and do whatever they're doing before or do something else. So they seem to be, there are other ways. I mean, obviously I'm a very academic oriented thing. Most people aren't that. So in terms of any way of getting their exposure, be it conversational or by other forms of media for something like that. And then, as you say, if they really feel, I need a bit more structure, going back and getting that structure and think, well, I'm getting the structure that I need so that I can now, with that structure, go back and maybe next time I try to set up my own self-study program, have a bit more momentum and get it going next time.